First of all, thank you very much for joining us for the last plenary of today. The topic that we're going to be discussing is going to be the renewables, energy integration challenges, and emerging solutions. We have a distinguished panel of speakers. So, first of all, we're organizing this session with my colleague Chiara, Prete, who's an assistant professor at Penn State, and I am Alberto Lamadrid from Lehigh University. So we're going to have three speakers. Our first speaker is going to be Ben Hobbs. He's a professor of environmental management at Johns Hopkins University. He has a long and distinguished career, so actually I just say that he's been working on different topics regarding air climate, health, and the electricity market, and he's also a member of the California ISO. Without further ado, because probably you're more interested in what they have to say than what I have to say, I'll pass it to Dan.
That's not true. Sure, go ahead.
Nitika Mago from ERCOT, and my colleagues from MISO. They're going to come after them, so we're going to hear different perspectives from different RTOs and ISOs and ways in which they're tackling this renewable integration, what challenges they're facing.
Thank you, Alberto and Chiara. It's really an honor to be here. It's a terrific session. I'm glad I'm going first because I'm a naive academic and being followed by two industry experts who really know what they're talking about. Alberto did mention that I chair the Market Surveillance Committee of the California ISO, but everything I say here is my own personal opinion, doesn't represent that of the ISO or the other members of the Market Surveillance Committee, Jim Bushnell or Scott Harvey. Okay, so let's see if the clicker works. If it doesn't, the old figure usually does. Okay. It's true for California. It's also true for Houston, although Houston has had a little bit of odd weather recently, I understand. I'm going to be focusing mostly on the California ISO perspective and how we're trying to deal with incenting flexibility in markets. And what I'll do in this presentation is quickly summarize the colorful California history. I've been on the Market Surveillance Committee since the crisis, so we've seen a lot of changes since then, and I think a lot of improvements. But the policy and technology is always moving faster than market design, so we're running hard to try to keep up. I'll talk about some of today's challenges, which are very different from the challenges of 15 years ago. And I'll look at two of those challenges in some detail. One of them is incentivizing the dispatch of flexible capacity in the short-run markets, and the second is incenting the construction of the right sort of capacity, including variable renewables. How much do they contribute to system reliability? How much should we pay them for their capacity, given that we have some sort of capacity market? You can look at market design as, well, you can say it's an evolving system that's adapting to the challenges. Or you can say it's like my uncle's tractor, a lot of baling wire and duct tape to keep it going. And at some point, the duct tape and the baling wire needs to be replaced. You need to stop kludging and start from scratch. And I'm going to ask whether we're at that point now. So a little bit about history. So whenever a legislative body passes a bill unanimously, you know there's a problem. There's somebody is not understanding what's in it. Restructuring in California was passed unanimously, and eventually what happened is we saw vertical unbundling, generation, transmission, and distribution, and we saw integration horizontally between the three largest balancing areas, PG&E, Southern California, Edison, and San Diego. So breaking up vertically, integrating horizontally. And we created a two-settlement system, one in which power was traded day ahead on a zonal basis, the so-called PX, Every day, people had to come in basically naked without forward contracts. All their supply and all their demand. And you can guess what happened. 3 zones disregarded other transmission constraints, and you can guess what happened. Then in real time, the market has to be feasible. You have to keep the lights on. You can't overload the other transmission lines. So the California ran a balancing market, the independent system operator, to increment or decrement generators to make sure you had a feasible dispatch. Okay, subsequently, we had a little problem in 2000, 2001, and the students I have in the classroom now were in diapers at that time. This is ancient history, man. I'm not talking about this. And there are some lessons. And one lesson was that if you don't have sufficient forward contracting, you're going to get quite a bit of manipulation in the spot market, even if the market seems unconcentrated. So Chiara and her thesis is simply the latest of a number of articles, and I think it's the most definitive one, in terms of documenting the amount of market power that's exercised when everybody comes into the market day after day. So anybody say tacit collusion? At this, facilitating the tacit collusion were the 7 plagues of Egypt, things like seaweed being sucked into the cooling system of nuclear power plants. So as a result, power bills went up 3-fold to $20 billion, and rotating blackouts occurred at the rate of 3 per month. And this shows that the system was working pretty well with only stage 1 and stage 2 emergencies through 1999, and then 2001 we had all those stage 3 emergencies, and I believe that was due to naked market power. It wasn't the Enron games, it was just simply plain economics 101, withdrawal of capacity from the market. The consequence of ignoring transmission constraints in the day-ahead market also had predictable consequences in that those who are located in generation-rich areas will sell a lot of their energy day-ahead at a high price, and then in real time, when you have to restore feasibility, they can buy back that production at a low price, earning money for doing nothing. And that costs the California ratepayer many tens of billions of dollars. So we had to fix that. And market redesign 2002. Well, it took a little longer, 2003. Well, after then, we stopped calling it MD04, MD05, and eventually, on April Fool's Day, 2009, we implemented the market redesign and technology upgrade, which had several features. We had integrated day-ahead and real-time markets, integrated in the sense that you could buy from one and sell to the other. This virtual bidding is the subject of a lot of papers in this conference. It co-optimized energy and ancillary services. The state imposed forward contracting requirements. They learned their lesson. Don't send people naked into the daily market. That's an exercise. That's an excuse for market power. Locational marginal pricing, reflecting all the constraints of the system, and then finally a system of financial transmission rights to hedge the risks. And I just saw Christian come in, and I want to mention that these are all now standard features of U.S. Structured markets, restructured markets, and of course are now features of European markets. And vive la différence, n'est-ce pas? And prices have been competitive since then. That's not to say that we haven't had a few challenges recently. Not market power, but other sorts of challenges. This morning we heard about, from Michael Guerra, we heard about the challenges posed by state-level carbon policies. In California, there's Arnold himself, who signed a bill to reduce carbon levels to 1990 levels by 2020, and they were going to reduce them a further 40% by 2030. Bon chance. I hope that works out. and it's a cap-and-trade system. Now, this challenge within a closed system would be a big enough challenge, but what makes it even a bigger challenge is that, as Mike pointed out, California is a very open market. It imports 20% of its electricity, and the other systems in the West tend not to have carbon trading, or they have different sorts of carbon systems. So here's the second challenge, which makes the first one more difficult, which is one entity in 5 states, Pacific Corp, wanted to join the California ISO day-ahead and real-time markets, and 11 other entities are joining, have joined, just the real-time market. So Pacific Corp merger has been put on hold because of governance difficulties, which Michael addressed this morning. But the EIM is going ahead seemingly full steam across the entire footprint of the West, although Southwest Power Pool and Mountain West may reverse that and push the tide in the other direction. We have competing RTOs competing for members, which I think is a very interesting problem. But at any rate, integrating these is proven difficult for reasons I'll mention. Renewable policies. This year, a bill failed that would have had the California market be 100% renewable by 2045. So we merely have a 50% target by 2030. And there are provisions that in practice make it difficult to import renewable power to satisfy those requirements. It's clear that a lot of this is not about carbon reductions, because we're definitely at the point of diminishing returns. A lot of this is about local jobs. And wind in Wyoming doesn't do that. So one thing that all the solar panels that my son is putting on the roof of his house in Los Angeles is doing is creating what's known as the duck curve, that basically in the middle of the day, the net load has decreased to dramatically low levels. So our real-time prices in the middle of the day are very frequently, by frequently I mean 20 to 30% of the time, negative. This is why 11 people want to join our real-time market, because basically we'll pay them in the middle of the day to take our power. Another challenge is integrating distributed resources, which we'll hear a lot more from Michael in our MISO speaker. In terms of organized markets, the California ISO is behind other markets, especially PJM in this respect. An issue we're wrestling right now, and we're going to have a hearing in 2 weeks about this, is a transmission access charge. And what happens is that transmission access charge is based on meter demand in the distribution system, which means that in front of the meter distributed resources on the distribution system don't allow consumers to avoid this $15 per megawatt hour charge. Whereas my kids, my snotty nosed son's solar panels behind the meter do help the utility avoid that $15. Now, $15 is not a lot compared to the $300 retail rate that my son pays in LA, but it still puts a thumb on the scale. And I think there's a real important question about, if we're going to build solar, where do you want it? The bulk system, on the distribution system in front of the meter, or behind the meter? And the incentives we have today is to cram it behind the meter, which I think is doubtful. Is not the best place, certainly in terms of cost, because it's twice as expensive, and not necessarily the best place in terms of the system. Okay, so here are the questions that we're facing in market design. We need flexible capacity to back up renewables, but combined cycle plants are complaining they're losing money, and they're going to scrap their units and sell them to Texas or Israel or somewhere. How can we keep them in the market? Because we think we really need them, but the market isn't telling them they need them. How can we appropriately reward contributions to system reliability? There has been a politically motivated capacity credit for renewables that doesn't differ by location or any of the other attributes it should differ by, and so is an implicit subsidy and not really giving you reliability. This is the big issue between greenhouse gases and the expansion of the ISO footprint, the California Air Resources Board wants to make sure that hour by hour that our energy imbalance market is not making carbon emissions worse. Not average over the year, which is what really matters environmentally, but hour by hour. So we're going right now, we're planning to set up this very convoluted way to try to construct a counterfactual of what emissions would have been without the market, and then somehow find somebody to tax for any increase in emissions that occur hour by hour. Incredibly kludgy. The issue of cost allocation was talked about this morning. If we're going to expand the day-ahead market, we have to figure out a consistent way to assign the costs for new transmission additions, for reliability reasons, for economy trading reasons, and for environmental reasons, trying to figure out an equitable and efficient way to allocate that. So that is a huge intellectual challenge. That effort, though, is on hold pending the solution of the governance issue of the California ISO. And then finally, I alluded to this in the last slide, how do we incent the right mix of distributed and centralized resources? Another thing we're going to talk about 2 weeks is Elon Musk has our board of governors roughly pretty much in thrall. He would like a special California ISO program to pay folks who have behind-the-meter power walls for storage services. Even though those same storage services could be provided by electric vehicles or by demand response, he wants a special carve-out for storage facilities that sound like the only ones that only he sells. And that has legs. I hope that we kill it and instead produce a level playing field so that storage and the bulk system can compete on the same basis as storage in the distributed system. We'll see what happens. What I'd like to do now is talk about 2 particular issues. This is the list of stakeholder initiatives that we're stakeholdering right now that deal with all of these issues, including distributed resources, including incentive flexibility, including expanding the regional market. There's greenhouse gases, and there's distributed resources and storage there. So lots to keep analysts, PhD economists busy if you're looking for a job. Okay, so let's look at a couple of issues in detail. One is ramp, and this is a ramp problem, but not the sort of ramping problem that we're referring to here, where in 3 hours we can see 300% increase in load, and we need to have a system that can respond to that. So how shall we reward ramps? Some people say we should create a capacity product that would be rewarded long-term, a small capacity product. Other people say energy volatility is enough. If energy prices go up and down, then you can reward flexibility to an efficient degree. I'll address that in the next slide. Now, that is actually true. If energy prices are volatile enough and not capped, not otherwise restricted, you really don't need a flexible ramping product. But the fact is, the averaging of prices over 5 or 15 minutes in the real-time market, or 60 minutes in the day-ahead market, dampens volatility. And so the energy market by itself won't incent enough ramping capability. So here's the theory. This simple model just illustrates why energy prices by themselves can be sufficient to reward rampability. So let's say we have 2 types of generators. The red ones are quick start, high cost, however, and the green ones are slow moving, but cheaper. So if we have morning ramp that looks like this, where load doubles from 1 hour to the next, the slow generator can't keep up with that, so you have to operate the fast generator during this 3rd hour. So here's the generation of each, and here are the prices. This is where ramp makes money. You understand the prices of $30 here and $30 there because that's when the slow unit's on the margin. You understand the $70 here because that's when the fast unit is on the margin, -10. Why does that happen? That happens because if you could increase demand by 1 megawatt, you could then have the green unit positioned a little bit higher, which means you could also produce 1 more megawatt here, offsetting the expensive unit. So 1 more megawatt here, you get 2 megawatt hours at $60 from the slow unit, but you save $70 from the fast one, hence -10. A unit that can start quickly and grab the high price and shut down quickly and avoid the really low price will make money in this market. You don't need a separate ramp product. Only failures of some sort in the spot market will justify the creation of a ramp product. So what are we doing in California? Belt and suspenders. We're going to keep those pants up. I truly believe we have to fix the spot market because that's going to reward generation when and where you need it. That's what we should emphasize. So we have flexible ramping, and thanks to FERC, we also are providing mileage payments for frequency regulation resources that can move faster. Both are paid almost zero these days. We anticipated this would bring a lot of revenue to flexible resources. That hasn't happened. So the suspenders are broken. Here's the belt, which is let's see, FRAC move, flexible resource adequacy, capacity must offer obligation. That's trying to create a capacity product that gets a higher price, installed capacity, because it's flexible. But we've had a heck of a time figuring out how we compare apples and oranges. How do you compare a fully dispatchable turbine with, say, renewables that can turn down, so we give you downward flexibility, with resources that can only start once a day and not twice, with demand response that can only be called a few times per month, with flexible storage, but that may only have a little bit amount of energy. How do we compare all those things? Is 3 hours of ramping enough? We actually don't know how to do it. I think it's a fool's errand to try to create a single capacity product that would cover all these things in comparable definitions. I think this is what we have to fix. We have to fix the energy market. But that belt is still being constructed anyway. This is a classic example of a kludge, of the duct tape and baling wire try to fix a market. And the kludges are accumulating. And at some point, we need to start from scratch. How much time do I have? Okay. So the second issue I want to look at is the amount of capacity credit to give to renewables. Now here in Texas, we don't have any stinking capacity market. But in most of the other organized markets in the US, we do have capacity markets. And the rationales for them are generally two, some sort of missing money argument that, that they don't get the full value of their production during periods of scarcity, so you have to shovel money at them from some other place in order to justify investment. And there isn't a liquid forward market, multi-year market, in which generators can hedge their long-term risks. Thank you. So as a result, the argument is that you get underinvestments, so we've created these capacity markets across the US. An example is the PGM reliability pricing model, which I confess I'm one of the guilty parties, or at least an unguided conspirator. That may be a phrase we'll hear again in this administration. Sorry, I didn't say that. Anybody remember the Nixon era? Okay, so we have a 3-year ahead product with administrative demand curve, and that's been modified over time to account for demand response for winter versus summer. In California, we don't have a formal market for capacity, but rather a requirement that load serving entities have to have a capacity showing annually, which will include this FRAC move, this flexible resource adequacy product in the future. And it's meant through bilateral contracts. So the issue I just wanted to address here, in trying to reward flexibility, which is the theme of this session, you have to figure out, okay, if we have a capacity market and significant monies are going through there, how much should wind, solar, other possible intermittents get from that market? How much credit should you give them? For example, 14% in PJM across the entire footprint from Illinois to Virginia and New Jersey, which of course is absurd given the quality of the resource varies and as well as the timing of the resource, but that's the number that they come up with. And importantly is, well, what is the inefficiency that results if you give the wrong credit? It doesn't really matter. I mean, if you get about the same amount of capacity or the costs are about the same, who cares? Well, might get a nice PhD thesis out of it, but really has no real world relevance. So this is a simulation that Cindy Bothwell has presented at last year's IAE meeting. And this turns out not to be California data, but Texas data of the impacts of giving wind and solar different levels of credits. And this is a scale of cost, and basically going from here to there is about 1% of total fuel and capital cost for the generation system. So this is several hundreds of millions of dollars per year, but it's only 1%. So if on one hand, in the extreme case, we have a price cap of $1,000 and we give a lot of capacity credit to wind, and even more to solar, because at least still in Texas, solar is helping us out in the middle of the day, not California anymore. The cost will be about 0.18 billion, 180 billion per year higher than the least cost solution. On the other hand, if you give no capacity credit, well, we're going to build a lot less of those resources, but the total cost distortion is less. So here it turns out that giving too much credit, too little makes a difference. And the optimal credit turns out to be 10% for wind, 54% for solar. And actually, the wind credit depends very strongly on whether you're in the high plains of Texas in the west or the north, or whether you're along the Gulf. And it turns out the credit for Gulf resources is actually greater, even though the capacity factor is less, because the wind there blows when you need the power. And this just shows the difference in capacity mixes, and this distortion in the mix is what increases the cost by 1%. You could say that's a lot or a little, but I think anybody who's worked with the Public Utility Commission knows that $180 million per year, even in the state as large as Texas, is not to be sneezed at. So in California, of course, we would love to see the day-ahead market spread across the West. The real-time market already is. And if we have a day-ahead market spread across the West, we're going to have to somehow harmonize mechanisms for defining resource adequacy in all the different states, which is interesting because basically under FERC tariffs, resource adequacy is a state responsibility. FERC approves things, but the states are given a lot of leeway. So the basic question we face is if a perfectly flexible resource gets so many dollars per year, how much of other resources get paid? And the proposals use some sort of effective load-carrying capability. That doesn't answer the question. It turns out we have strong diminishing returns. As you add more renewables, the effective load-carrying capability, the average value goes down and the marginal value plummets. So unless you say, are you going to pay folks the marginal value or the average value, you've left a big ambiguity there. There's also ambiguities about whether we should locationally differentiate. What are we going to do about thermal resources? Look what's happened to the San Onofre nuclear power plant. We lost a couple of gigawatts there. Should the large nukes get less of a capacity payment because they threaten reliability more? And then here are some other studies that confirm this one, that we have strongly diminishing returns as you add renewables to the mix, and the marginal rates, well, anybody who studied economics know that marginal revenue falls down at twice the slope as average revenue, right? Same thing is true with average ELCC versus marginal. And we haven't figured this out. Should the resources that were built first, that came in at this point, should they be paid more than resources that came later? That seems fair to some, but certainly inefficient to others. Okay, so I'm going to conclude, ask, when ought we continue adding baling wire and duct tape to our tractor, and when should we get a new tractor? And I love quoting this article, and Steve Stoff, thank you for pointing this out to me. This article in AER points out the history of, I'm sure you all fondly remember Windows Vista. Okay? And then here's what followed after that, Windows 7. And this is an example of kludges. So a head programmer walked in Bill Gates' office and said, it's not going to work. That the accumulated kludges over the years, the duct tape was getting in the way of the baling wire, and it wasn't going to work. There were buds drilling software. With each patch of enhancement, they became harder and harder to strap on new features and slow things down. That's why Vista was a disaster. Windows 7 was started from scratch and worked a lot better. So the question is, when should we do that with electricity markets? Are we at that point with the California market where we have so many patches that people don't understand how the market works and the prices don't make sense? So Alison Silverstein, who was the main author of the Secretary Perry report from last summer, but she points out she did not write the conclusions. Energy dominance is not in her vocabulary. She just was quoted in the press yesterday as saying that the NOPR is a disaster, and if the people who wrote the NOPR had read the report, they would never say that the NOPR is based on her report. But she gave a talk yesterday, not here, but at my university, where she said we ought to pick up the Etch-a-Sketch and shake it, just like this earthquake supposedly did that did all the damage to the Etch-a-Sketch Art Museum. I think this is fake news. That she's saying capacity markets are at that point right now. We ought to just be brave like Texas and get rid of them. We ought to reward resources when they produce energy and where they produce it, when it's most valuable and where it's most valuable for the system. We shouldn't be trying to pay for iron in the ground. And she has a real point. I think we might really be getting to that point with capacity markets for flexibility. So with that, I'll conclude. Thanks very much. Shall we go on to the next one?
Anybody who has a clarifying question? No, otherwise we'll wait until everybody's presented.
I know I'm not going to learn anything if I talk, so I'd like to hear the next presentation. But if there's a quick question. Okay.
Second speaker is Mike Robinson, MISO.
Okay, thank you. So it's a little bit odd here speaking this afternoon. I'm used to speaking in front of large audiences and small audiences. I'm used to speaking before the MISO stakeholder group and also external groups. And I'm used to speaking with an audience that has a background in EE. But that EE stands usually for electrical engineering, not energy components. And so you'll see that in some of the slides that I present here. But, so thank you. And I don't have any sort of opening slides about what MISO is. You know, we're a big RTO. we serve load as far east as a little bit of Ohio, as far west as a little bit of Montana, as far south as a little bit of Texas. We include the other southern states, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana. And we also go as far north as Michigan, Wisconsin, Dakotas, and then we include the province of Manitoba. So fairly big system, and you can go on our website and you can see all the details here. But so let me talk a little bit about some background here. If you heard this morning's talk from Elizabeth Wilson from Dartmouth, she talked about some of the conflicts, the competition across RTOs and the competition within RTOs. And she pretty much spot on with some of that. So when we started our energy markets in 2005 on April Fool's Day, and we weren't fooling around. We started in 2005, and we had a hard time getting these markets up and running. We ran into lots of resistance in the MISO stakeholder community about why do we need markets? What are these markets you talk about? We've ran these power systems at 1 day in 10, lost a lot of expectations for decades without these markets. Why do we need these dang markets? And so I would go out to the various utilities and try to talk about the benefits of markets and how they can improve reliability. And it was a tough road to hoe, but so we ran into a lot of resistance, but we did start them on April 1st, 2005, conducting day-ahead and real-time energy markets. And then a few years later, we decided that we still didn't have the right incentives in place because we were just conducting energy markets. So we started talking about conducting markets for ancillary services that we needed, mainly regulation spin and non-spin. And so we had, and it was clearly, there was not incentive compatibility back then. Because if you were providing ancillary services, you're getting your cost recovered. But if you were providing energy, you were getting locational market prices. Okay, market-based, market clearing prices. So you can see the disconnect. If we're trying to operate a reliable grid and you have resources trying to chase energy to collect market revenues when they have signed up for providing spin array, that's endangering reliability. So we engaged in a long 2 or 3 year stakeholder process to drop in ancillary service markets and co-optimize then both the day-ahead and real-time market. And we were quite successful. But again, go back to what Elizabeth said this morning here. I can recall on many occasions as we were trying to write the business rules and write the tariff language to file at FERC for this co-optimization of ancillary service markets within MISO, I can remember being in a room, there were 10 of us in a room. There was one attorney, okay, there were 8 engineers, and there was me. And I'm the market advocate. And so you can guess how many wins I got. I figured, we're in Houston with the world champion baseball team. If I won 3 out of the 10, I was doing good. And so I did win some, and I'll talk a little bit about them. But that's the issue. That's the issue today. Okay, I can count on one hand at MISO how many economists we have, and I don't know, we have 300 electrical engineers, 300 IT people, 20 people HR, 20 legal, 20 settlements, something like that. So we have a lot of people. And so that's why we have this slide here. It's typically in front of engineers trying to talk about the benefits of competitive markets and how they enhance reliable grid operation. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But we've had this since the market started. This is a win on our part in terms of our market philosophy. From the very beginning, we tried to have this philosophy of let's set up the energy markets and the ancillary service markets right. Okay, let's try to have an open, level, non-discriminatory playing field where both buyers and sellers can voluntarily participate. So we had observed what had happened in California. You don't want to force people to bid all their load in the day ahead. You don't want to force generators to offer. As long as we already have market mitigation rules in place, so as long as they're not taking advantage of market power, no worries. So let's have a voluntary and vigorous participation on both the supply side and the demand side. And so that's been our philosophy from day one. And so this talk here, the title is Distributed Energy Resources, and variable energy resources. For the distributed energy resources, if you can see this slide here, this really helps in terms of avoiding generation capacity, additional generation capacity. It helps in terms of supporting reliability. So we have distributed energy resources that provide spin, non-spin, and regulation. I'll talk about that directly. It also helps to mitigate prices and mitigate price volatility. We've done studies for that. And it does go a long way towards limiting supplier market power. And so that's distributed energy resources. I've intentionally not put in variable energy resources because it's not clear to me that variable energy resources achieve any of these ends, that we have possibly some reliability issues, and we'll talk about that, how we've addressed that in a bit. So this has been our philosophy from the market start. Now, in terms of the distributed energy resources, what I have in this slide here, it's nice if you're a demand type resource, a distributed energy resource, because you have a choice to make. You can participate on the supply side or the demand side. And so on the demand side, you can respond to prices. And so if the price is too high, you're not willing to pay, you can drop off. And we have some evidence of that. But also on the supply side, you can participate as a supply side resource. And so that's a really good example where we treat the distributed energy resource like any other generator. So for generators, they give us how much time they need to start up, what their min run time is. Same thing for these kinds of resources. So we have a steel mill that is willing to drop 50 megawatts of load, but it has a startup notification time of 6 hours, and it has a minimum runtime. It's going to send a shift to workers home. It has a minimum runtime of 8 hours. And so we treat it just like a generator. It comes in on the supply side, and we'll dispatch it based on the difference. So, but our philosophy from the very beginning was, in terms of subsidies of different resources, we really haven't looked behind the curtain there. So we've from the very beginning, internally, a few of us as economists, we referred to this paper written in 1956 by Lancaster and Lipsey, Theory of Second Best, where there's all sorts of outside influences, all sorts of subsidies from resources. We're not going to go in and try to identify every resource subsidy that is gotten by a market participant. And so we kind of echoed if you followed what former FERC Chairman Norman Bay said on his exit comments. He said essentially that. He said, there's all sorts of outside influences. Let them just fall where they may. Let the costs and benefits of those fall, and just make sure you dispatch the market in the least cost fashion, respecting the transmission constraints. So from the very beginning, we tried to echo that. We haven't really talked about the theory of second best in front of the MISO stakeholder community, but we have talked about it internally. I always put this slide in because, like the Tesla example here, we don't have any demand side programs, okay, at MISO. We've intentionally tried to create a level playing field. So if you want to participate in our markets on either the supply or demand side, come on in. But demand side programs, these are usually temporary initiatives to promote some activity. It usually comes with side payments for participation that somebody else pays. It's socialized across the footprint or a small part of the footprint. And so we've tried to avoid those and just provide opportunities and incentives for full participation. Our market participants, through their state commissions and other retail electricity providers, they have programs. And so, and they have programs, they can choose to participate in MISO or not with those programs. Some do and some don't. So here's, you probably can't read this, so I'll go to the next slide here. But again, this is a situation, what we're showing here is we're conducting day-ahead and real-time energy markets, day-ahead and real-time ancillary service markets, regulation spin and non-spin. And we also have a capacity requirement that load serving entities are obligated to achieve. And then we also have emergency provisions. And so in the case of variable energy resources and demand distributed energy resources, they can participate in all these. It's really up to them. So here's another way to look at it here. What we don't have currently, because there hasn't been a need, So we offer, you can put in price-sensitive demand bids in the day-ahead market. You can't do that in a real-time market. And it's simply a reflection of the fact that very few end-use customers in our footprint anyway are facing some proxy or some variant of MISO's real-time energy prices. And so there really hasn't been a need. We've thought about it as more and more end-use customers are going to see a reflection prices vary based on MISO's real-time energy prices. We're going to have to address this. We've thought about it a little bit. It's going to cause a change in the dispatch algorithm, but we haven't really addressed it yet. But outside of that, these kinds of resources can participate in just about any one of these markets, as long as they can provide the service in question. And so, in terms of the distributed energy resources, we had a lot of pushback again from not the market participants, but our operators. So early on in 2009, I was advocating, let demand resources, let behind-the-meter generators, whatever the resource is, let them come in and provide spinning service, spinning reserve service, which is a 10-minute product. Our operators were adamantly opposed to that, okay? Because our operators came from the old local balancing authorities before MISO existed, and they were used to knowing the operator at power plant A, and knowing the operator at power plant B, and knowing they could call Bob or Joe and say, you know, can you ramp up? We just had a contingency, we need you to provide service. They were comfortable with that. They were comfortable with the visibility of that. They were not comfortable with Duke Energy having 150,000 customers on AC control that were going to provide spinning reserve service, okay, which they could. And so as a result, we compromised. I won a little bit here. I said, let's start with a 10% cap. That at most, we're going to procure 10% of our spinning reserve requirement from distributed energy resources and see how it goes. And so it was successful there. After a couple of years, we had quite a bit, 30, 40 megawatts of true demand response providing spin, and we did the study, and we also saw it during the polar vortex. The distributed energy resources providing these kinds of ancillary services perform way better than the generators, way better, okay? And so as a result of that, we convinced the operators. They can't see 100,000 customers on AC control. They can't see that. But once we did the analysis, they were in support of it. And so now we upped the cap to 30%. It started to bind there, we subsequently upped it to 40%. It sits at 40%, but the cap never binds, so there's never any price separation. So we haven't really made any changes. But we've been very successful convincing our operators and the stakeholder community that these kinds of resources should be allowed to participate if they can provide that service. And we were the first ones to allow demand resources to provide regulation, which is under our agency control. And this is not a behind-the-meter generator. This is a true demand resource. It's a aluminum smelter where they draw in heat in their pot lines, either consume more or less heat, and they provide regulation up to anywhere from 30 to 40 megawatts, and that's a lot. We have a 130,000 megawatt system. That's our summer peak, roughly. Our regulation requirements are 400 megawatts. Okay, that's not a lot, right? The rule of thumb is usually 1%. PJM, until they made some changes, like 2%, a lot, because they weren't performing. They made some changes, and I'm not sure how they perform now. But we're only procuring 400 megawatts hourly on a 130,000 megawatt demand system to provide regulation. And out of that, 40 megawatts was a true demand response. We did the analysis again. They performed way better than the generators. Spot on, moving every 4 to 6 seconds. It's unbelievable. So we've convinced the operators then that let's relax some of these artificial constraints and allow these kinds of resources to participate if they can, in fact, provide the service. So this topic here was supposed to be, there was supposed to be some planning stuff here. I'm not a planner, so I got 3 slides that talk about planning. The long and short of it is, in terms of, we do different scenarios, 8 or 9 scenarios in our transmission expansion plan. And what you need to draw away from this here is that we look at different views of how demand and energy is growing or not, what's happening to fuel prices. We got some demand side conditions, energy efficiency growth, and we look at renewables. And so we've been doing studies on renewables, and from a planning perspective, I think the renewables is pretty easy to address, because if it's going to be grid-sized renewable energy, it's going to be in an interconnection queue. So we know what's coming, and so the planners are quite comfortable trying to address the grid and the need for transmission investment based on what they see in the queue. But they do studies. This is another. They're looking at these studies not only from a reliability perspective, but they're also looking at it from operations and whether the system's going to be stable or not, the need for voltage, things of that sort. So they're doing these studies. They're quite comfortable. For distributed energy resources, it's quite different because these resources are not in an interconnection queue, and they're being built. So rooftop solar and other types of distributed energy resources. And so there's a whole host of issues here that you see here. I'm not going to go through all of this again. I'm not a planner, but from the market side, there are a couple of different aspects from the market side. One is we're trying to look at if we have any artificial barriers to participation in our market, and we do have some. I didn't win all the arguments here. So we have a potential market participant who has like I think it's 150,000 customers in the northwestern part of our footprint on water heater control. Okay, and they want to provide regulation service. Well, we have a rule that we set up. In the beginning, we were just trying to get these markets in. We had plenty of regulation. We only have a 400 megawatt requirement. We have 4,000 or something units that can provide regulation more than that. And so we didn't see the need to accommodate that. We have a rule that says if you're going to provide regulation, it's got to be at one bus, one injection point. And so the water heater program can't provide it, although they're providing it, I believe, in Ontario with tremendous success. So that's an artificial barrier to participation that we're trying to address. There's a host of others. What's the level of aggregation do you allow? If we're trying to do congestion management with some of these resources that could span from the Dakotas to Minnesota to Wisconsin, we have major congestion from the west to the east, from Montana over to Wisconsin. And how do you manage congestion when you've got a resource that's aggregated across that? And so there are some issues from the market side that we have to address. From an operations side, we have very little visibility. The operators would like to have visibility for these behind-the-meter resources. We do not have that. That affects your load forecast. We've already seen that a little bit in some of our operations this year. And so that means if we don't see it, we'll overcommit. It's going to be costly, some more uplifts, things of that sort. And so there's operational issues. And then the planning issues. My understanding is, again, because it's not in the queue, these planners are looking 3, 5, 10 years out trying to build transmission, and they're trying to assess, should they build transmission to address this local reliability issue? Should they allow generation to come in to address it? Or they should look at distributed resources? And they don't know. They don't know what's going to be built. But they know they can provide the right incentives and suggest that transmission get built and go through that process. And so more than likely they try to address these requirements or these issues with the transmission build. But that's the big issue for distributed resources is what happens in terms of the planning environment. How do you address this? So now I have 4 different market aspects that we've addressed. So I think Elizabeth talked a little bit about this, how we address wind integration into our footprint. She got most of it right. There was a couple issues there, but so we've had over a 7-year period from 2009 to 2016, our wind penetration doubled from roughly 6,000 megawatts to 12 or 13,000. Right now we have like 17,000 megawatts of capacity in our footprint for wind. And so early on we recognized that we would have some issues with wind. We can operate the system reliably, but we're doing a lot of out-of-market manual curtailments, PLRs and things of that sort. And so early on, we went through the stakeholder process and created what we call this instrument called a dispatchable intermittent resource, where the market participant can put in monetary offers to reflect their willingness to either stay on the system or drop off based on what the price is compared to their offer. And so So right now, roughly out of that 17,000, roughly 85, 86% is dispatchable resources, intermittent resources, and we grandfathered in the existing ones. So a dispatchable intermittent resource is a wind farm that can feather their blades, can turn certain windmills off out of their farm, but can move and can move down when the price gets too low. And so the only difference between them and a generator is they don't have a static or invariant econ maximum or emergency max. So they have to give us their forecast of their maximum load roughly in 5-minute intervals every hour. So we know how much they can possibly give. But other than that, we treat them just like a generator, and so we allow prices to go negative. They go negative quite a bit, but as prices get more and more negative, we dispatch these resources off. And so this has gone a long way to avoiding out-of-market manual curtailments. We have very little out-of-market manual curtailments today from the integration of wind. And so these resources submit offers in both the day-ahead and the real-time market. They don't tend to participate as fully in the day-ahead as we see with other resources, but we're not worried about that because we allow virtual participation at every pricing node in our footprint. We've done that since day one as well. And so the virtual suppliers have stepped in where the wind farm owners are not putting in their capability that they expect to see in the real time. Virtual suppliers step in and raise their price. 2 minutes, okay, 2 minutes. So we've done this in terms of wind integration. The next thing was, though, as a result of this wind integration, we had ramping issues. Okay, and Ben talked a little bit about the ramping issues here. And so we engaged in a fairly rigorous stakeholder process, did a cost-benefit analysis, and at the end of the day, we decided that it was more fruitful to offer a ramp-up and ramp-down product. Okay, and so we did that. And so we compromised that with these ancillary services here. We dropped that in May 1st of 2015, and the market clearing price is simply their opportunity cost. So we're looking out 10 minutes ahead, and we think we know where load is going, but there's variance around it. We know the variance. We think we know where wind is, but there's uncertainty and variance around that. We have net scheduled interchange that fluctuates based on prices. There's uncertainty around that. We build that all in, so we pre-position our system and reserve some resources with unloading capacity, but we pay them for that. So their opportunity cost of not providing energy or another service. That's been very successful, and so this happens throughout our markets. That's dropped real-time prices by about 1%. Since we've dropped it into the market. We've saved over a 5-month period, we did this analysis, a reduction in production costs of $4.2 million. We reduced price volatility by 7% and improved price convergence by 3% and reduced scarcity pricing. So this has been wildly successful and we're quite happy with this. And then the next step was, the next thing I should add, and I'll end up here, because we have time constraints here, is we've recognized a long time ago that LMP is not a market clearing price. Okay, it's not. Okay, it's not. Market clearing means no buyer, no seller is frustrated to attempt to buy or sell at that price. That's not the case. And on one side, we provide uplifts for generators for them to follow dispatch. So we, based on the convex hull approach, we dropped in what we call ELMP, extended locational price, where we embed into the market clearing price the startup and no loads if we call on a fast start resource, or if we have a resource sitting at min load or max load. Typically, they won't be able to set price with our optimization algorithm, but now we allow them to do as well. And so this is called extended locational marginal price. The results have been quite good on this one here. When we call on these fast start resources, prices are a little bit higher, not much, okay? You can see the results there. It's roughly a $1 megawatt hour increase for those intervals where we're calling on them. Most of the time, LMPs are equal to ELMPs. We've reduced uplift by about 1%, and when we get into scarcities, we'll be able to drop price by $15 per megawatt hour. And price convergence has improved by over 2%. So this is called extended locational marginal price. We've gone through a couple of these phases. We're going to do